Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Today I'm going to be looking at a beautiful book from my childhood that I never really quite got over, and it is called Caleb. So I thought I would share it with you today, and I hope that you enjoy this video. I'm going to do a little bit of a review on it and have a talk about it. It is written by Gary Crew and Stephen Woolman. Very well done. And they collaborated again after they worked on The Water Tower. And I'm so proud of this book, and I'm so proud of this type of work, because I feel like you don't really see this level of depth anymore in books, in kids' books particularly. And this is one of the most beautiful books I've ever come across, and as a kid I was really fascinated by it. So I'm going to explain a little bit about it, and then we're going to kind of go through it, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on it and kind of unpack it a little bit. So at the moment I am in lockdown in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm just going through the motions. I don't feel well enough put together to do art at the moment because my brain is so fucking unbelievably scrambled. So I'm just managing day by day as I can. If I don't reply back to you, please don't take it personally. I just don't have enough capacity for everyone right now, to be honest. So it's nothing personal, but I mean, and I'm an artist, so I go through periods of time myself where I want to be social, and then I need everyone else to basically leave me alone so I can do the work. And that's very hard to explain to people that are not artists, but if you can hold enough respect for me to understand it's not personal, I'm never going to be that friend that just messages you every single day ping-ponging with you. I'm just not that person, and I really have to limit my time with social media because it is so destructive to me right now. Okay, so I come and go as much as I need to, and yeah, it's already what, 11:30, and I'm on my second gin and tonic, so that's how I'm going. So yeah, looks like let's just look at this beautiful book. I can't get over it, and I just want to share something special with you guys. Like, it's a book review, I'm filling in some time, and I'm just wanting to put something beautiful out in the world. I cannot for the life of me understand why this book isn't more celebrated, why this book isn't more understood, why this isn't in more literary classes and more kind of circulating at universities or design schools. I mean, maybe it is, but I just don't feel that this gets enough credit. I don't think that Stephen Woolman got enough credit. I did mention in my last video that he has since passed away, and that Gary Crew, the writer, is an Australian who lives in Brisbane. He was a former school teacher, and he started making books the year that I was born. So he's been doing it for over 35 years, and he teaches. And I find him so fascinating. If you know Gary, or if anyone has ever met Gary, I mean, it'll be so interesting to pick his mind and talk to him about his work and what he does. And this combination between these two creators just works so well, because Stephen's illustrations are unmatched and the story writing is so intriguing and so interesting. So let's have a look at the cover of the book. I love that the title of the name of the book, Caleb, is about the person that obviously the antagonist character in the book. I'm going to flip it this way first, just so and please bear with me because I've only got one hand. I'm holding the camera with one hand. We've got this really macabre, avant-garde vibe going on, and I really dig it. It's so well done here. We see the use of light and shade, and we've got this figure here. It's kind of quite abstract. This very alien-like, very small, thin, scrawny neck, and this big, heavy, weighted head. And the bugs and the insects are making up the shape of the person, which is so interesting. And I feel like this is kind of reminiscent a little bit of high fashion. I don't know if you get that vibe, but I do a little bit with this. I feel like the bridge in his nose is very sharp. It feels a little bit like if I could put it down to a person that I know, Sharon Stone, the actress, she has this type of very striking bridge in her nose. And as you can see, all of the insects there. Now, this is all hand-drawn. Back in the day, there was no Photoshop when this was done. This is hand-drawn stuff here, guys. Like, this is unbelievable. It's all done in pen work. And obviously, they've inverted it to make the white stand out. And it was all done on paper and on black paper with charcoal. So it's obviously introducing us to the character. And for some people that aren't very abstract or are able to look at something in an abstract kind of way, they wouldn't really see the face here, but we can see clearly we've got this mysterious face that's looking at us, and it feels macabre, it feels dark, it feels supernatural. And that's what this book is. It is supernatural. It is the unpacking of a supernatural being, and I really, really enjoy that. So I'll read the blurb to you, or the little bit of the index there. One moment he was there, and the next he was gone, swallowed up in the night. Some argue that he is dead, perhaps murdered. I believe that he is out there, somewhere. And wherever he is, he will be waiting and watching. Beautiful work. And it's all grey lead pencil. Look at this beautiful owl. If you get a chance and you're able to hire this from, or hire it or buy it, you can get it on Amazon or find it secondhand on eBay or something. You can get it at a library. It's just so beautifully done. Very, very soft palette here. And we get the owl, obviously. There's a lot of storytelling happening in the illustrations as the book unfolds. And we're getting shown, you know, the owl takes off, and it's kind of leading us into the story. Now, the artwork is very, very, very detailed and gothic, and it all is done in just hand-drawn pen scribing. So very, very good use. I'm trying to come in nice and close so you can see the detail. It's very, very gothic. It's a very beautifully described and illustrated and very well thought out layout for each page. Now, this book is very heavy in text, and it does use a lot of more complicated words, and the angles that Stephen Woolman has illustrated the book from are just so well thought out. And we see the beginning of the book starts with the window. He's looking out the window, which is kind of reminiscent to the end of the story. So the start and the finish kind of, you know, finish off. We finish where we begin in the story. And if you get this book, and I just can't say it enough, the illustrations are all pencil done here, so soft and beautiful that they are telling us, like the insects around the edges of the story are telling us things about what's happening in the story. And it's just so interesting. So the story is, it's about a young man called Stuart Quill, and he is studying at a university to become a professor or to be a biologist and work in the field of studying insects. And he is assigned a very unique person that, or being that comes to study with him, called Caleb Van Dorn. And Caleb's father was a very famous scientist. And very quickly, Stuart begins to realize that Mr. Caleb is quite a unique being who isn't entirely human. And the way that this kind of is told is from the perspective of his dealings with Caleb, and the illustrations show the unusualness of it. So Caleb comes to stay with him. They have to share a dorm. And Caleb is very outspoken, and his voice is the way that it's described in the story, he's very chirpy and loud, and he is very opinionated, and he's not very well liked in the lecturing hall. But something feels off about him, and Stuart quickly realizes that there's more to him than appears. And it's really interesting because this book, as you know, I'm into a lot of metaphysical stuff, I'm into a lot of shadow things, is very reminiscent of the 90s, and it's very reminiscent of the X-Files series when, you know, this book came out in the peak of that time when, you know, Mulder and Scully and, you know, things like that. And so Mr. Van Dorn, Caleb, goes up into the attic, and that's where he wants to be, his room. He discovers that he wants to be up there, and we see the use of shadow. So we're always seeing the story from the perspective of Stuart as he's telling the story, and we see the shadow of Stuart. Yet again, I cannot get over how beautiful the illustrations are. I have to keep this video under 15 minutes or I have to make a part 2, but I'll probably have to do a part 2. And what we're seeing here is the stages of the metamorphosis, the metamorphic stages of the insects. Like we've got this grasshopper here, and it's beautifully done. You've got this, you've got the wording, obviously. Now this is text heavy, like I said before. This is probably for about a grade 6 or probably about a 12 or 13 years and up, to be honest. And it is dealing with supernatural things. It's dealing with evolution. We see there is an evolution that's happening through the story. And, you know, the stages, there's all these little clues that are going on in the artwork here. I'll come in so you can see. I'm not sure if it's gonna, yeah, there we go. So you can see it's really, really interesting the way that it's worded. Anyway, he begins to feel a bit threatened by Caleb and he's trying to understand him. And we see here, look at that, the shadow use. Look at the use of artwork there on the wall. We can see his shadow. It's just so well done. Back in the day, this type of artwork wasn't very in. Like at the moment, this is so the rage right now, doing pen work, like that very severe, scratchy, scribey kind of vibe. But back then, this was just like state-of-the-art stuff. And it still is, and that's why it holds up. I always felt that this book could very easily be put into a film. And one of the things that happens in the story is that Stuart goes out on an assignment where he is assigned a partner and no one really wants to work with Caleb. And he goes off and wanders off into the forest. And the perspective here is so well done. It's showing us this intimidation, the angle and the moon and the trees in the forest. It's just, yeah, so good. I hope that you're enjoying this video. I'm just sharing this video. I could only imagine how long all of these beautiful drawings would have taken, and it's all done in pencil. And that's, you know, I did the Goliath tarot deck in pencil, and I feel like all art builds on art. And I feel like without books like Caleb, I probably would never have done the Goliath tarot deck. It's really interesting how my subconscious was so influenced by this type of work. Here we have a scene that's unfolding. It's very sinister, where Stuart comes up into the top of the attic and sees Caleb eating, and he's actually eating raw meat in a bowl with blood all over his mouth. And he says to Stuart, you know, he asks him, like, is that raw? Like, I can't believe that you're eating raw meat. And Caleb's response is more like, well, it's only natural. Like, you know, humans are the only beings or species that eat food cooked. Also looking at the fingers, like look at his fingers, there's something so sinister and scary. This book scared me. It really scared me as a kid. I was so terrified. I used to like, you know, I would have been like 8 when this came out. And I remember just my imagination for this character, because I see this as like a movie, or I saw this as like some kind of TV series. So it really deeply affected me actually, and it really bothered me. I remember look at that, like that's a very Silence of the Lambs there, that moth with the death skull on it. Yeah, so it is probably a little bit more from a mature audience. And one of the things that the book looks at is Caleb seems to go through a transformation in the story, where it looks at his relationship that he forms with a woman called Emily, who is also, you know, a lecturer. And Caleb, well, I'll spoiler alert, Caleb ends up, it's not said in the story, but it's certainly implied that something happens between the two. And yet again, look at the owl, the shadow, the use of the shadow, the perspective and the angles of these illustrations. Caleb's formed a relationship with this woman, and he ends up killing her. And this is where it gets really interesting. We see the mating that's happening. So I'm guessing they would have mated, or they've had sex, they've fucked. And that's what's happening with all of the insects. The insects are kind of warning us what's going on in the subtext. And then we get to the end and we realize that Caleb has consumed her. And this is what it deals with. This story deals with, we need to consume energy to grow to meet our full potential. And Caleb has a hunch on his back that's growing bigger and bigger. And we see this transformation of him coming out of this cocoon. He's coming out of this state into his final stage. So it's dealing with evolution. It's really, really interesting. And of course, now he's reached his full, his full transformation has occurred. And his way that the character sees death and transformation is really interesting. And this is my favorite illustration. I'm trying to get it so there's no shine because this book has gloss on the page, but look at that. That's amazing. That's amazing. And this is Caleb's full transformation, and it's shown from the same perspective of the window that we saw at the start of the book. And he's fully transformed into his final stage. And that's kind of where the story ends. It ends there. And the police are looking for Caleb, and it is scary. There is an element here that is unsettling, but I feel like this use just really works. This soft pinks and the orange, it's just reminiscence of old things or otherworldly things. The book itself feels like a museum, like you've gone into like a dusty museum that's full of lots of moth specimens or, dried insects and things like that. And that's what happened in the story, is that Caleb drank all of her fluid, drank all of her blood. And from that, he was able to meet his full transformation. So it's very reminiscent and is influenced by horror films. Stephen said in an interview that a lot of his illustrations came from studying of horror films or studying movies, that he kind of, reminiscence, it seeped into his collective and it became a thing. And it's always lamp lit. Everything's lit very well in the artwork as well. So everything, it's all perspective and lighting. So one of my favorite, like here we go, it's all shadow. Everything in this is shadow. And it's just so, look, shadow, yet again, shadow. It's just shadow. It's so gothic and so creepy. I guess it really is. And I just think that if you're studying illustration and you're in some kind of, study, this is such a great book to have as a reference point for how to depict light. And yeah, it's just a classic for me, and I really enjoy looking at it all these years later. I also imagine Caleb's form. He's very tall, he's very skinny, he's very awkward. His voice is very chirpy, the way that it's described in the book. Like, hello, Stuart. He kind of would talk like that, 6 foot tall. And the way that it's kind of described is that he has this, skin stretched over his skull. And always is very well spoken and very articulate in the way that the character is depicted. His voice is very chirpy. The wording is done so well, and it's just brilliant. It's very kind of reminiscent a little bit of Clive Barker's earlier work, I would say. So if you enjoyed this little review, please check out the book Caleb. I feel this is just so well done. I would have loved to have seen a sequel to see where this ended up and what became of, Emily's death and what happened in the story. It is gruesome, but it's also, it is what it is. But the design work here over the front and back cover is just so good, so good. And we kind of come to the conclusion that we think Caleb is some kind of rare insect himself that goes through a process where every couple of 100 years he will reinvent himself or reform himself and come back in human form to kind of study humans. So it's kind of like this duality that's happening where we're studying insects and different rare types of insects, and Caleb is an insect or is part insect. So yeah, it's really well done. It's kind of formed in like an 1980s style gothic narration, I guess you could say. And some of the words are a bit lengthy, but nothing that you can't get through. So this was my version of the beautiful book Caleb by Gary Crew and illustrated by Stephen Woolman. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. And please, if you see it around, check it out, hire it, and I'll see you in the next book review. Be well, and from lockdown Melbourne, I hope that you're well. Bye.